Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Lawless. I am part of the Family Process Institute webinar committee, which consists of Jason Black and Vicki Dickerson, who you see Vicki, but you don't see Jason, but he is here on the call. So thank you for joining us. Today we have a wonderful presentation by Dr. Imber-Black, and we'll get into introducing her in a second, but I just wanted to take care of some housekeeping stuff. Just as a reminder, you will be muted throughout this webinar. The participants, if you want to ask questions, you'll have to go into the chat box and send us your questions. We are going to go through the presentation, and during certain times, Dr. Dickerson will ask Dr. Imber-Black questions, or toward the end ask questions. So if we get to your questions, that will be good. If we don't get to your questions, a lot of questions come in. We apologize up front, but we're going to try to do our best to get to as many questions as we possibly can. I also want to let you know that we are recording this webinar, and it will be posted on the Family Process Institute's YouTube channel. If you want to find it, you can go to YouTube and search Family Process 1 as one word, Family Process 1, the number 1, and you should find us, and you'll see a lot of the videos that are associated with the journal, but you will also see this as well too. We will let you know about its availability. We will email all the participants, but you will also see it on Twitter and Facebook too. So Dr. Imber-Black will present her work, and Dr. Dickerson is going to help facilitate that. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Dickerson. Dr. Dickerson is a clinician and author, a teacher of narrative ideas and practices. She is the associate editor for technology and new media for Family Process. She teaches in various institutions, universities, and does workshops nationally and internationally. She has written numerous articles, book chapters, and has 2 books. Her publications are included in the recent articles in Family Process. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Vicki.
Thank you, John. I don't know that John introduced himself. It's John Lawless. John is the treasurer of the Family Process Institute, which actually is in charge of running the journal Family Process. And it's Family Process Institute that is sponsoring this webinar series. Dr. Evan Imber-Black is the 3rd in the series. We had Dr. Bill Madsen, Dr. Foma Walsh, and next month we will have Dr. Kata Weingarten. So it's my pleasure to introduce Evan Imber-Black. I've known Evan for 30 years, and she's been a mentor and a colleague and a good friend. But to give you a more formal introduction, Evan Imber-Black is the program director of the Marriage and Family Therapy program at Mercy College. Dr. Imber-Black is the former editor of Family Process, the major scholarly journal in family systems research and family therapy. I'm going to show you that journal. This is her next to last issue in September. Well, it couldn't be. December 2011 was your last issue. She founded and directed the Center for Families and Health at the Ackerman Institute for the Family in New York City, and she's still currently affiliated there as senior faculty. Evan Imber-Black is also a professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, where she founded and directed the Urban Institute for Families and Family Therapy Training. Dr. Imber-Black is the past president of the American Family Therapy Academy. She's the recipient of the 1990 American Family Therapy Academy Award for distinguished contribution to family therapy theory and practice, and the 1999 recipient of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy Cumulative Contribution to Marriage and Family Therapy. Throughout her internationally recognized career, Dr. Evan Imber-Black has made major contributions in thematic areas that cut across different models of practice, including families and larger systems. Here's her Families and Larger Systems book. Family rituals. Here's her Rituals for Our Times book. And family secrets. And today, Dr. Imber-Black will be presenting her work on the secret lives of families. I know this includes new material. I know that Dr. Imber-Black has written recent articles for contemporary magazines. So I think we're very fortunate to have her here to present. Dr. Imber-Black will present her slides, and after about, I think, probably about an hour, we will take questions. You can send questions in at any time, but then I will be in conversation with Dr. Imber-Black about what your questions are. So thank you, and Evan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. I'm going to start this webinar with a very short reading from Audre Lorde from her book, Sister Outsider, to bring us all together and begin to think together about the topic of secrets. She says, "And of course I am afraid, because the transformation of silence into language and action is an act of self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, 'Tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent. Because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it out, one day it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside.'" She goes on, she says, "We can learn to speak when we are afraid, in the same way we learned to speak when we are tired. For we have been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition. And while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of silence will choke us. The fact that we are here and that I speak these words is an attempt to break that silence and bridge some of the differences between us. For it is not difference that separates us, but silence. And there are so many silences to be broken." Now, I like that quote very much. For me, it holds the complexity in secrets and the need to make decisions about secrets and to respect the difficulty to speak, but the need also to speak. In the family therapy field, there have been rather polarized approaches to secrets through the decades. On the one hand, people saying, never open secrets, and on the other hand, people saying, always open secrets. So I'm thinking, for instance, early in the field, the work of Jay Haley, who said, don't open secrets. It's not the job of the therapist. He actually said it's rude for the therapist to open secrets. And he based that on the work of one case. And that case, some of you may have read or seen, A Modern Little Hans, went round the world, and people for a long time were saying, never open secrets. And then along came the work of the Milan team, who added a little layer of complexity, but were still saying, don't open secrets. They said all the therapist needs to know is the process of secret keeping, not the content of the secret. Now, at the other end of that continuum is the work of the Bowenian therapists, Murray Bowen and his followers, the late Ed Friedman, who said it's the job of the therapist to open secrets, that secrets make people anxious, that's not good in relationships, it leads to triangles and so forth, and so the therapist should be about the business of opening secrets. So here you have two very different polarized positions. And I must say, over the years, my own position has come to be what I call it all depends. Now, what I hope to show you in the short time that we have today is that this is not a sloppy position. It's not based on the phases of the moon or how I happen to feel that day, but on a disciplined look at multiple interacting systems, on identifying where a secret might be located, on looking at issues of timing and the kind of secret that we're dealing with, and what is it that is the impact of a secret on an individual, a couple, or a family. This is a chart that probably a lot of you are familiar with, the multiple interacting systems. And I'm interested in looking at where our secret's located. Now, clearly, no one comes into us in a therapy session and says some version of, I have a secret and it's contextualized at the social, cultural, and political level of system. That is our work, to begin to think about where do secrets begin? And the first place being the social, cultural, and political level of system. Think for a moment in your own lives, back to your own childhood, and think about what things were secret, not necessarily in your own family, but in the culture at large, that are no longer secret today. And I'm sure we could make a very long list of areas of secrecy that are no longer secret today. Now, they may still be secret in certain families, and I think that's an important thing to remember. But we have, for instance, social discourses at the level of culture about a whole host of matters that previously were secret. Divorce, adoption, sexual abuse, homosexuality, money, on and on and on. We could make a very, very long list, and as I'm talking about this, I want to invite you to be thinking about that. What would be on that list? Drugs and alcohol, and so forth. And so the question, first of all, is what happened? How did we go from having so many topics that were off limits, that a family might have been struggling with but never spoke about, to a place today where not only are they speaking about it, but sometimes there's too much talk about it. So what happened? Well, one of the things that happened, of course, are talk shows. And that as talk shows began to become popular, more and more topics that previously were off limits, that were taboo, that a family thought they never could speak about, began to be available for first a cultural discourse and then a discourse within a family. Now, we might look at that and think, wow, are there still secrets today? And of course there are. And those might be, for instance, secrets that have come down the generations. I'm going to talk about a case with you in a little while where we'll look at that, where a secret may have begun in one generation and it's still impacting the next generations. And so even though a lot more is open today, nonetheless, the secrets still pertain. In addition, and probably a lot of you are seeing this in your consulting room, there are new secrets today. Secrets that people are keeping using texting with for an affair, or email, so forth, social media, thinking rather foolishly perhaps that they can keep secrets that way, and very often those secrets burst open. We saw it just this last couple of weeks with all of the emails from the Sony Corporation of things that they thought were secret, and of course are not secret once it's out there in cyberspace. So the first place you want to think is, what are the social, cultural, and political changes that might be going on today that are going to affect how we think about secrets, what things get talked about, what things were secret a generation ago and may still be secret in a family that you're working with today or a couple that you're working with today. Then we want to look at larger systems. Now, in larger systems is where you're going to find a lot of cover-ups. You'll find institutional beliefs and norms about secrecy, policies about secrets, interaction then of the larger systems with couples and families. So I'm sure all of you are quickly thinking of examples here. The child sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church, corporate secrets. A lot of you may remember the so-called 7 dwarfs that came before Congress looking at all the secrets about big tobacco. Sexual abuse in the U.S. military. Maybe some of you have seen the wonderful documentary Invisible War looking at that issue. And on and on and on. Now, these are secrets of arrogance, and these are secrets based in a set of beliefs. We know what's best for you to know in areas that directly affect your life. And you may find, excuse me a minute, the lights are going out in here. Okay, we have motion detector lights. You may find that people are coming into you having experienced the painful aspect of being part of some kind of larger system secret. Now, what happens with larger system secrets is they open very often in a particular kind of way. And I want you to think about this as a model. First, some kind of whistleblower. So let's take the example of institutions for the mentally ill and the mentally handicapped. You may be old enough to remember that we built those institutions way out in the countryside where nobody could see them. And in the 1960s, there began to be whistleblowers who were looking at the fact that children and also adult patients in these institutions were being abused. They were being physically abused, they were being sexually abused, and then there began to be documentary filmmakers, very good journalism, quite different than the talk show kind of thing, but really good kind of investigative journalism. And then that's followed by a social movement. And very often that social movement is comprised of families whose whose family member is caught up in an institutional secret, a larger system secret. And as those social movements get going, then they usually bring a court case, new law is created, and the secret is opened. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the end of it, obviously. Again, if we even think about something like the institution mentally ill, mentally handicapped, the promise when they closed those big hospitals in deinstitutionalization was that there would be community mental health, and we all know that that's a promise that's only been partially fulfilled. But the families that started the movement around those institutions still exist in the organizations that they have, NAMI, FAMI, and organizations like that. And you will see that trajectory of a whistleblower, some good investigative journalism, a social movement, court case, new law, in the opening of larger system secrets over and over and over again. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. We know, for instance, with the clergy abuse in the Catholic Church that sadly it's still going on in parts of the world. But the opening of that, the writing about it, the social movement is what really began to break the secrecy. Then we want to look at the family of origin level. This is including extended family, 3 generations, a secret that maybe was made, and probably a lot of you have experienced this, a secret that maybe was made 50 or 60 years ago. And it's still having reverberating effects in family relationships coming down the generations. Here's where you're going to find intergenerational patterns shaped by secrecy. You're going to find the core beliefs about secrecy on the one hand and privacy on the other. And I'm going to come back to that in 1 second to draw some distinctions for you. And key experiences in family history. Is this a family, for instance, that lived through a war? If so, likely there are secrets. How did people survive? We know now that rape is an instrument of war. And what happened to people? So key experiences like that, experiences located again at that first level of the social and cultural level, where maybe somebody had a child before a legal marriage, and that was kept secret, and that reverberated down the generations. Certainly suicide. You'll look at a genogram, and you'll see people talking about a mysterious death, a single car accident, 1 or 2 generations ago, out of the belief that if we talk about it, it will promote suicide in the present. We know from all the research that, of course, it's just the opposite, that it's keeping it a secret that really leads to a greater likelihood of that. Let me go back for a moment to this issue about secrecy and privacy. It would be terrible if we lived in a culture where there was no privacy. We need privacy. People have less and less privacy probably today in terms of cyber issues. But private issues don't impact another person's right to know the information. Okay, I want you to think about that. What does it mean, someone's right to know the information? Well, what is the impact on another person's life if a secret is being kept from them? In private matters, there's no secret. It's private. It's within certain subsystems in the family. So parents certainly have private matters that they don't share with children about their own relationship, their sexual relationship, and so forth. And children, hopefully, can also have some privacy from their parents so that not every thought, every idea, everything that they may be doing is known at every moment of the day by their parents. So privacy is extremely important. Secret matters, on the other hand, usually are about someone else's right to know, matters that affect someone else's well-being. Let's think for a minute about birth origin secrets, paternity secrets, where somebody it's being kept from a person, who their father is, whether they're adopted, and so forth. And it would certainly be my position about that people have a right to know their birth origins. Today, that information leads to all kinds of not just relational matters, but medical matters as well. A sense of ethnicity, a sense of where I come from. And then if we go all the way to the other end of the life cycle, looking at the period when somebody may be experiencing a terminal illness, it would again be my position that people have a right to know that so that they can make decisions about their care. There are still parts of the world today where that is kept secret out of the belief that if you tell somebody that they have a terminal illness, they will give up and die. And you'll see this in many South American countries, you'll see this in Asia, that those matters are still usually kept from the person who is ill. So you want to know in a family, what are their core beliefs about secrecy and privacy? And then there may be situations where you're in fact going to take a position about that. Let's take a moment here and talk quickly about a case. This is the family that really changed my mind about secrets. I kind of grew up in the field, both in a structural and strategic way of seeing things, and then ultimately very influenced by the Milan approach. And the Milan team was definitely saying the therapist does not need to know the content of the secret. They went rather out on a limb, I would say, in their book with Lynn Hoffman and Peggy Penn, saying the therapist doesn't need to know the content of the secret, even if that's a secret of incest. But I was very influenced by their work, and I held that belief for a long time, that the therapist does not need to know the specific content of the secret. And then I met this family that you're seeing on the screen. And the 72-year-old woman was the so-called identified person in the family because she had what was termed a compulsive hand washing problem and a phobia of germs. This handicapped her in inordinate ways. She washed her hands, no exaggeration, probably 100 or more times a day. When I first met her, her hands were red and raw, and her family interacted with her in a way where they kept trying to talk her out of this. You don't need to be afraid, there are no germs, and so on and so on. Sorry, the lights are going out again. Here we go. Okay. I met her when she was a patient in the hospital, and I was at the family therapy program at the University of Calgary as the training director. And I was asked to do a consultation with the family by a psychiatric resident who was working with her in the hospital. I asked the resident what things were being considered at this moment, and he said, well, they're thinking of putting her in a nursing home. I said, why? Is she ill? And he said, no, but the staff thinks her husband needs a break and her family needs a break. And it was the kind of presentation that I know all of you have heard at various times when people feel like they're failing with a case and they begin to get rather punitive. I asked at that point, hearing a variety of treatments that had been tried, medication, couples therapy for her and her husband, acupuncture, biofeedback. At one point, they had a microbiologist come and lecture her about germs when she was in the hospital. Did you ever try to talk someone out of a germ phobia with reason? Not a great plan. But what had never been tried was whole family therapy, and I said I would like to see everybody in the family. And I began to do that. The 44-year-old daughter did not come. She wrote a letter to me in the first session. This is my parents' problem, leave me out of this. And so that was a little intriguing. I didn't know what that was all about. And in the first session, the family told me some very interesting things. To begin, they really could only talk about mother's hand washing. And when I tried to expand the conversation, I felt like I was on a very short leash, an experience that a lot of you probably have had, and they kept yanking me back to mom's symptoms. However, they did tell me in that session, we think you should know we are a family that doesn't like outsiders. And I said, who are our outsiders? And they said, everybody except our immediate family, meaning their in-law children were outsiders, and certainly therapists were outsiders. I said, how do you treat outsiders? They said, with politeness and distance. So that was nice and clear. And I began to think, I was working with a team at the time, we began to think, what is going on in this family that they cannot speak about anything else except the mother's symptom? That to me is often a clue. Sometimes people ask me, how do you know when there's a secret if people haven't told it to you? And one of the clues very often for me is when people will only talk about one thing. I'm a pretty good interviewer, and when I find that I'm constantly pulled back to only one topic, I really do begin to think there are things here that people are not comfortable speaking about. We met for a while. They rapidly became one of the families that I wished would never come, and they always did. And we didn't know what to do as a team. We met on one occasion with just the grown children and their spouses. The daughter, who had said she would not come, met with them before that meeting in the middle of the province in Alberta. And they brought back messages to me saying that the problem of the mother and the problem in the couple, which I had not heard about before, was something that they simply couldn't cope with. It was affecting all of their marriages. It was affecting their relationships with their own children. And so we did a very interesting session. I've never done it before, and I've not done it since, and that perhaps is something that you want to think about, that when you're working with secrets, or maybe in any of this work, there's going to be times when you just try something new. And that was, we put the children behind the one-way mirror as my team, and I interviewed the couple. And I told the children to call me anytime they wanted to bring up something new, or if they thought their parents were being polite and distant with me because I'm an outsider. I tell you, those of you who've ever worked with live supervision, and you get maybe 1, 2, maximum 3 calls in a session, I had 35 phone calls in this session. The phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing. I would put the phone down, I would say who called, name the person, and then ask the question. So that the session, you see, became an extended metaphor from secrecy to openness, using the one-way mirror as that kind of psychological barrier that we were now going to move through. Somewhere around 3/4 of the way through, I was called behind the mirror by my team, and I walked in, and the children were fighting with each other. And the argument was this. The older children saying, go back in there, keep doing this is the best thing that's ever happened to our family. And the younger saying, no, our father has a heart condition, you need to stop. Now, probably a lot of you have heard in therapy the idea that you can't go somewhere because somebody has a heart condition. And if you start to talk about some kind of secret or some kind of difficult matter, the person will drop dead. I am here to tell you that if all the people who were supposed to drop dead by hearing secrets actually did so, we would have a much smaller population. So I went back in and I reported to the couple what the children had told me. And I asked them to go think about it. Should we push on or should we stop? I asked them to call me in 2 weeks. 12 weeks went by before I heard from them. Now, this is an interesting learning, I think, for all of us, that sometimes it takes some time for matters to work their way through a system. The mother called me. She said, do you think it would do any good for us to come in? I said, I don't know. What do you think? She said, I think we need to come in. She and her husband came in. I went out to the waiting room to get them, and I tell you, it was like seeing a different couple. When I first met this couple, you all know that Grant Wood painting with the couple with the pitchfork? That was this couple. When I went out to the waiting room that day, they were smiling, they were laughing, they were sitting next to each other on the couch, which I had never seen before. And they came in and they started to talk about their history. I didn't ask. They spontaneously began telling me about the beginnings of their relationship. The beginnings of their relationship were very painful because the 72-year-old woman had become pregnant out of wedlock, so-called out of wedlock, a quaint term today. And her family sent her and her now husband away. Sent them to another province and basically told them, don't come back. While they were there, they actually had not just one child, but 2 children out of wedlock because they had no money at all and could not manage to put it together to get even a wedding license and pay a minister. They told me this story. It was like it happened yesterday. The pain that they both felt. The mother talked about getting a very mean letter from her mother-in-law, and this was something the husband had not ever heard about. And this is something you'll see as you're working with secrets with families. There's never just one secret. That as things become secret, the family keeps more secrets. And I asked them towards the end of that session, who do we need to talk to? Who do you want to bring in? And they both said the two oldest daughters. They said it's about them. We need to talk to them. We did a session in which they opened the secret to the daughters. The daughters sat there and said, but we know. We've always known. You've always asked if you could look at our wedding pictures, and you've never shown us your wedding pictures. It is amazing the kind of small details of life that tell people there are secrets. At the end of that session, they got up to leave, and the mom, the 72-year-old, had not touched anyone in 10 years. She took my two hands in her two hands. I felt very honored to be the first person that she was touching. And she thanked me, and she said, we're going to go and drive over to our other daughter's house and our son's house and talk to them. Because I did say, you know, now we've made another secret, and they both said to me, no, we're going to open this. Now, one last thing before we move on that came out in this session. There was always a mystery about the 44-year-old daughter. Why wouldn't she come to therapy? Why did she send me that very ferocious letter? Leave me out of this. Well, guess what? She had gotten pregnant, and they had thrown her out of the house. And I talked with them about how difficult it is to do better with something that's been secret in your own life and that's been a source of shame. Just very quickly, after this session, the mom made her own plan for how she was going to stop washing her hands. It took her 8 weeks. She did so, and we continued doing some therapy that I'm not going to go into now because we don't have the time. So let's talk about the household level of secrets. It's here that you're going to find all of the relational patterns related to secrets, triangles or triads, when two people know something and a third does not, whether it crosses the family boundary. So for instance, an affair where one person in the family, one adult, is relating with someone outside the family. There may be the kind of thing where a parent confides in a teenager, tells them a secret, keeps the other parent out of it, which certainly ties up family relationships terribly. Issues of power, issues of the impact on communication when there are central secrets. A number of years ago, Peggy Papp and I had a case in which a little girl would not speak outside the family household. She would speak at home, but nowhere else. And when they came to the first session, she was playing on the floor, she was coloring, and at some point, her mother whispered to me, sort of like a stage whisper, "I've been married before, but she doesn't know it." And I'm thinking to myself, gee, she's not deaf. She won't speak, but she's not deaf. And this little girl looked up, looked at her mother and went like this, looked at me and went like this, and went right back to playing. And you will see sometimes a rather odd impact on communication in the family when they are tied up by secrets. Certainly the emotions in a family when there are secrets, you'll see a good deal of anxiety, both in the moment when secrets are being kept, and then when secrets open. I think very often it is imperative that we be able to walk alongside people with sadness, sometimes with anger. Initially there may be big anger when a secret first opens, but I think if we can hang in, they will hang in and get to another place. The family life cycle stage. I do find in my work that secrets are often made right at the moment of life cycle transitions, and they are often opened at stages of life cycle transition. So for instance, I often get calls in the summer, July, August, from families where a youngster is about to leave home and go to college. Why? Because the parents have been keeping a paternity secret from that child. And they get it that there may be no more chances. Now is the time when we need to open this. Usually I prefer if they call me in May rather than in August, because that doesn't give us a whole lot of time. But there is, I think, a sense of pressure that builds up in the family. Probably a lot of you, as I have worked with the kind of ubiquitous opening of secrets after a funeral. It's kind of like all bets are off, and now it's time that we deal with whatever has happened in the family. And then the individual level of secret. Again, you want to look at what developmental stage individually is someone at, and is this someone who has been living life inside a secret or life outside a secret? So what do I mean by that? Are they the one carrying the secret? This is life inside a secret. Are they the one living outside the secret and often shaping their identity by information that they don't even have straight? So let me give you a quick example. A few years ago, a woman from Brigitte magazine, the German magazine, called me up. She said, I'm doing a piece on secrets, a major article, may I interview you? I said, sure. She said, great, I'm coming over to New York next week. So she did. We talked for about 2 hours. And as often happens when I sit and talk to someone about secrets for 2 hours, at the end she said, let me tell you one. And it was the following. This is a woman who grew up after World War II. She was born after the war in the 50s. She said, I always identified with America and things American. She said, when I was a little kid, I noticed I would walk into a room, and if anybody was talking about anything having to do with the United States, the topic would immediately change. You know, children notice these things. And she said, I got curious. She said, then when I was an adolescent, I used to say to my parents, I'm going to go live in America. And they would get furious. And she got more curious. What was this all about? In her 20s, she did begin to shape kind of a core identity of herself as someone who didn't want to be German. She wanted to be American. She married an American, came and lived here for a while. The marriage failed, and she ended up back in Germany. She said her friends would say to her, what's wrong with you? You're a German person. Why do you want to be American? She said, I don't know. It's just how I feel. Well, about a month before I met her, so no surprise she was wanting to write this article, she said the secret opened. Her parents, who were at that point people in their 80s, were having a huge argument. Her mother called her up and said, you have to come over, we're having a big argument, you have to help us settle it. And going where angels fear to tread, and family therapists sometimes know better, she went to her parents' house. And as she walked in the door, she heard them yelling at each other about a secret that went back to the period right after the war. Her father had been a soldier and was captured by the Americans and was taken to a prisoner of war camp in Georgia. Her family was sectored in the American sector of Germany at that point when they divided Germany into the sectors after the war. Her mother had an extramarital affair with an American GI. When the father got home from the war, the brother, who was at that point 14, told the father what the mother had done. They never settled it. Okay, it sort of sat there like a lump in their relationship. This daughter is born after that. Okay, she's not the daughter of the American GI or anything like that. But her whole life, she's sensing they are keeping something from me, and I don't know what it is. And then she lives her life this way. So let me shift for a few minutes now. I want to talk to you a bit about making decisions about concealing and revealing a secret. The first thing I think about is who owns the secret. When you're keeping a secret that primarily regards your life, then you're the owner of the secret. Decisions to keep it or open it belong to you. If you feel you need someone else's permission to open a secret, it probably doesn't belong to you, or you're caught in a web of relationships that need work before opening the secret. So for instance, if your best friend tells you she's leaving her husband, that secret doesn't belong to you. If you're leaving your husband, you don't need your sister's permission to tell your father. And again, I think many times what happens in families is somebody will tell a secret to one member, and that person will say, oh, I'm really glad you told me, but whatever you do, don't tell, fill in the blank, mom, dad, whoever, because it will make them sick. Then I ask the question, who has a right to know the secret? Some secrets contain information that's at the center of other people's lives. Secrets like that include birth origins, medical diagnosis, and so on. These secrets involve another person's right to the information, and keeping them involves an arrogant position, assuming that you know best for another person in areas of life and death. I want to ask myself, does the secret violate shared assumptions in a relationship? Intimate relationships usually involve shared assumptions about what will occur and what will not occur. These may be spoken or they may be implicit. When a secret violates these shared assumptions, the person kept out is operating from rules that no longer apply but have not been renegotiated. So when you keep a secret that prevents your spouse or your lover or your best friend from making good decisions, likely you're violating shared assumptions. Then the question, of course, who's being protected? Secrets are often born in protection. That is often the motivation. Are you keeping a secret to protect another person, yourself, or a relationship? Has the protection outlived its usefulness? These are questions that you can use in therapy as you're interviewing people. Question myths that another person will collapse if you open a secret. And ask yourself, is the relationship enhanced by the secret or infused with alienation and distance? You want to know if a secret is being kept out of intimidation. Many secrets are kept out of fear or threats. And you want to know that certainly with the cases, the families and couples and individuals that you may be working with, and I'll talk more about types of secrets in a moment. Is the secret being kept because of overwhelming shame? Very often deciding to open a secret involves facing painful and debilitating shame, and we try to avoid that shame through secret keeping. But shame and secrets often exist in an escalating dance with each other. The more shame, the more secrecy, the more secrecy, the more shame. And the first step as therapists may be to enter an empathic, witnessing relationship with our clients in order to dissolve the shame that's underpinning the secret. Let me say a few words about kinds of secrets, and then we'll begin to take some questions. I find it helpful to think about 4 kinds of secrets. The first being sweet secrets. These are temporary. These are for the benefit of other people. These might be things like a surprise party, for example. Gifts that we're giving, and we wrap them up. We don't just leave them out for people to find. These are sweet secrets, and they are time limited. And this is great for therapists because you can use that in rituals that you may design with people. Then I think of essential secrets. These are necessary for life cycle unfolding, for protection. Think, for example, of the secrets that African American slaves kept from slave owners that were embedded in songs, in spirituals, and in the quilts that the women sewed. Okay, so that's a good example of an essential secret. In today's world, the kinds of secrets, for instance, that somebody may be keeping in a violent relationship and they're looking to escape. Okay. I think the kinds of secrets that we as therapists get most interested in are toxic secrets. These are the ones that poison relationships over time. They may be 50 years old, they may have happened last year or last week, but they really poison relationships, and it's our job then to help people to open them. Finally, dangerous secrets. Some of you may be working with this, the kinds of secrets that place people in profound physical danger, very serious drugs and alcohol, suicidal threats, homicidal threats. The difference, there are many differences, obviously, between toxic secrets and dangerous secrets, but an important difference is that in toxic secrets, you have time on your side. If something has been a secret for a year, 10 years, 50 years, it doesn't have to open next week. You as therapists can wait, you can work with it, you can try to figure out a good way to open this, you can see who's motivated to work on opening it, and so forth. Dangerous secrets, we don't have time on our side. We need to act swiftly. In certain kinds of secrets, as you all know, for instance, in terms of Tarasoff, we may need to notify police. We may need to notify ACS if it's the abuse of a child, and so forth. And so with dangerous secrets, you don't have time on your side. So let me say a few things about guidelines for the interview that I find helpful. The first, and this probably goes not just for secrets, but for all of our work, maintaining a stance of what I call respectful curiosity. You may sense a secret, you may want to help people to begin to open it, but you're going to need to go with their timing in a respectful kind of way, again, unless it's a dangerous secret. Maintaining a multi-systemic view, so going back to that original chart that I showed you at the very beginning, so that you can contextualize where is a secret located, and how do I then begin to talk to people about a particular secret. Capturing and creating what I call meaningful themes, listening for ways to thread things together for people that they may not be threading together. Capturing and creating meaningful rituals, helping people sometimes through rituals to heal when there's been a long-term secret. And finally, of course, with secrets, facilitating speaking the unspeakable. I'm going to bring this part of the presentation to a close, and then we'll take questions with a quote from H.L. Mencken, who said, "Penetrating so many secrets, we cease to believe in the unknowable. But there it sits, calmly licking its chops." Thank you. So, Dr. Dickerson, you have questions for me?
I'm here. Do we want to take Evan's screen off and just have our pictures on? Would that be helpful?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So,
what do I do here? You were made okay. I'm clicking okay. Oh, there we are.
I think you're fine. I think you're good. So I've got to move things. So as far as I know, our attendees either do not have any questions or they're keeping them a secret.
Oh dear.
I haven't seen. I'm going to keep the panel open so I can see if any questions come in. I do want to remind people, feel free to ask questions. I don't really think I should be the only one asking you questions. But this is my curiosity question, Evan. I knew you. I first met you before you got interested in talking about, writing about, thinking about, working with secrets. So what got you interested?
Okay. Yeah. Great. That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Did I cut you off? Are there more? Is there more to that?
Nope, nope, that's it.
Okay. Actually, before I knew you, I was beginning to be interested in secrets. Um, through a case, this was when I was teaching at the University of Massachusetts, with a couple that I was supervising the case behind the mirror. It was a couple that came in, and session after session would, what can I say, talk without talking. They clearly had something that they would not talk about, could not talk about. They would even go so far as to say that, well, it's all about that time. And when the therapist tried to say, well, what was that time? Well, no, just it was about that time. And this was a period in the field when, again, Jay Haley had talked about in his book Problem Solving Therapy that the therapist does not need to know the content of the secret, and that in fact to ask people is considered rude. And so as a team, I had a team of graduate students, we decided to ask the couple to come in and write down on a piece of paper whatever that was, whatever that time was. And there was a very funny sort of 10 or 15 minutes where they were sitting there looking very puzzled, and what do you mean? And it was just that time, and the therapist kept saying, yeah, write it down, that time. Finally they did. This was on rather large sheets of paper, and she took the paper and she asked them to fold it up as small as they possibly could, so that in action we were trying to see if there was a way to make whatever this big thing was that was separating them much, much smaller. And then we took out a little tiny box, a very pretty box, and had them put the papers in the box, put the cover on. This was January in Western Massachusetts, and we asked them to put their coats on. The therapist had a shovel outside the door and took them out behind the clinic. There was a hill, and they climbed up the hill, and she asked the couple to dig a hole and put the little box in and cover it up. And then we brought them back into the clinic, and she said to them, okay, so whatever it is, we don't know and we don't need to know, is now over here behind the clinic in the ground. They lived about 45 minutes from the clinic. She said, it's okay with us if you fight about this, because they were fighting about it all the time without telling us what it was. However, we'd like you to agree with us now that if this comes up, you'll get in your car and you'll drive over here and you'll climb the hill and finish the fight there. And they laughed and they thought we were a little nuts, and they left saying, yeah, sure. And we saw them in a couple of weeks, and it was like a different couple. They had not had any arguments about that time. They were interested in talking about a lot of other things which they really needed to talk about. And that particular case, I would say, underscored for me what Jay Haley was talking about. The therapist doesn't need to know the secret, okay? However, I certainly began thinking, and this came more when I was doing the family and larger system work, looking more broadly, that this idea that we can generalize from one case to all of humanity was beginning to not make quite so much sense. That case was a lot of fun. I wrote it up. It's called a non-marital marital therapy. It's in an old case book of Al Gurman's. But then I moved to Calgary, which is where I met you, and the influence there began to be the influence of the Milan team, because that's the way we were working with the Milan approach. And again, it was the therapist doesn't need to know the content of the secret. Only the process of secret keeping, using circular interviewing, who's closer, who's further apart, because the family has a secret, who would be happier if the secret opened, and things like that, without ever going for the content of the secret. Then I met the family that I talked about 15 minutes ago, and that changed my thinking. And it was that I began to think, wow, maybe there's times when we do need to know the content of the secret if we're going to be able to really help people. So it raised for me, as I think for all of us, we get reified, we get ideas that we think are absolutely correct, and then, thank goodness, the goddess sends us a family or a couple that changes our mind, that begins to challenge us. And at that point, I think we have to go back, start reading again, start thinking again. For me, begin to write, begin to challenge myself. And that was really, it was really that family, I would say, that that began to make the difference in terms of my thinking about secrets and wanting to develop a way of working with it. Now, let me just say a couple more things about that. Secrets within the field were not really talked about very much. I mean, there was this polarization, always open, never open. But if you look in the indexes, even today in the major textbooks in family therapy, you will not find entries for secrets, family secrets, taboos, which has prompted me to say secrets have been a secret in the family therapy field. And I wonder about that, because what could be more ubiquitous in families than people keeping things from each other? Whether it's big major things like a paternity secret or money or something like that, or just the tiny things that people say, oh no, she can't hear this, it will upset her too much, and so forth. And what does that do to people's relationships? Again, I'm not someone who says everybody should tell everything. This is not a talk show position. But I think there are an awful lot of things that people come to us and they are suffering because they haven't been able to talk about whatever it is between them, something that somebody maybe was carrying all alone and they needed to talk about, something that someone was curious about as a child and was told none of your business, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So we're now getting lots of questions.
Hey, good.
That's good, huh? That's good. So that really was a very compelling story about that family.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I think a lot of people loved it. So here's a question. One of the first questions that came in. The person says, I'm curious about the family case you spoke about and the mother who compulsively washed her hands. Did bringing out the secret help her with this behavior, since she's powerfully touched you after not touching anyone for 10 years? Now, I think that it did, but maybe you could say more about
that. Yeah, I mean, here's what was so interesting. After that session where they revealed the secret to the two daughters, then they came in the next week, and the mother, it was just the couple that came in, the older couple, and the mother looked at me and she said, do you think you could find a germ expert I could talk to? And I tell you, my first take on it was, oh, are we going to talk about germs again after what we've just been through together, please? And I had a trainee behind the mirror, very astute, called me and said, listen, Evan, I think she just wants to get out of the corner she's painted in. Why don't you find her a germ expert? I thought, okay. So I said, let me work on it. And what I did was I brought in a colleague of mine, a wonderful pediatrician. He sat and talked to her in the most respectful way, wanting to find out from her what her questions were. She had wonderful questions. She wanted to know, for instance, how long does a germ live in a shoe? Not long, you'll be happy to know. And she laughed and she cried and she said, now I can go shopping. He framed her fear because, you know, when the family first came in to see me, they said, oh, this is all in the last 10 years. Which was coincidental in time with the father's major heart attack. So my initial hypothesis was a life cycle hypothesis. It went absolutely nowhere. But in fact, she always washed her hands more than the average bear, going back to childhood. And my pediatrician colleague said to her, you know, makes sense. When you were a kid, there were all kinds of very dangerous germs. Kids would get sick and die. But now we have vaccines, and that doesn't happen anymore. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Now, I put this in the context of the fact that when she was in her second hospitalization, they made her talk to a microbiologist for 45 minutes, a real germ expert. He left. She said he's a liar and washed her hands. Okay. So she was ready to hear something. She was treated with respect. And at the end of that session, she looked at me and she said, well, I just need to do this my own way, you know. I said, you sure do. She came in the following week with a plan. It was a funny plan. I mean, it was like, this week I'll touch doorknobs and I won't wash my hands. Next week, my husband can bring in canned food and I won't spend the day washing the tops of cans. And on and on and on. The 8th week, I will play the piano again. Now, she had been a piano teacher who had stopped touching the piano.
Wow.
And in 8 weeks, she got over her symptom. Now, please don't leave this webinar and say Imber-Black says opening secrets is a cure for OCD, because I will deny that I said that. But in this instance, where her symptoms, her set of symptoms became, however they started, and I think indeed all the way back in childhood with fears and so forth, and then went into full bloom in her marriage and got worse and worse, and again, in a system where there was a central secret, this became the only thing people could talk about. And that's what I want people to take away from this, that, you know, the case is wonderful and it's fascinating, but think about your own work. And when you're sitting with a family and you're trying your best to interview in all kinds of ways and they won't go there. They just keep yanking you back to the thing they came in with, and that's all they want to talk about. Okay, I start to think, what can't we talk about? Okay, then obviously the art of this work is trying to figure out, how do we figure that out? How do we get at it? How do we make the consulting room safe enough that people can open something? There's another case that I show in my workshops of a woman whose daughter was raped by security guards in their building, a handicapped young girl, mentally handicapped. And we got help for her. The parents were able to get knowledge about these security guards, that this had been happening with other kids, and on, and the mother was just falling apart right in front of our eyes. And we met with her alone. I was in the room, Peggy Papp was behind the one-way mirror, and she came in and she sat down, and the first thing she said to me was, I'm glad my children and husband are not here, because I was nearly raped when I was a small child. And I asked her a question. She said, this is by a family member. I asked her another question, and she changed the subject. It was like she had never said it, okay? I tried to bring it back 2 or 3 times. She would not go there. And all I could think was, we need to go back there before she leaves today, no matter if I have to cancel things, whatever. I'm not going to have her leave thinking we can't talk about this, but how am I going to get there? Well, we got there through creating a genogram. We hadn't done it because they came in, they were in crisis. We had 2-3 sessions. And through making her comfortable enough going into her genogram, then she ultimately was ready to talk about it. Okay, so you need lots of different ways, I think, to get people sufficiently comfortable in the room that if there is a secret, they will tell you. Now, that's one kind of presentation. Other times people will call you because they have a secret and they want to figure out how to open it. And that's a whole different kind of work. Again, as I say, I get these calls about paternity secrets often when kids are going off to college. But it might be a situation where someone had a child and the child was made to think that someone else was their mother, and they now want to tell the child, and so forth. On and on. There are all kinds of things. Somebody may come in and say, I cheated on my wife, husband. I want to open this, and then we'll look at, is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? And how to best begin to do it. And then knowing that once a secret like that opens, that's the beginning of the work. And that's often true with secrets, that's the beginning of the work. Then the work is helping people to integrate whatever it was that happened, and do that in a good way and move on.
So I would comment on a couple of things, and then one of them comes from a question someone asked. What I want to comment on is how I notice your versatility in utilizing whatever you are thinking about that might be helpful. So, for example, you just talked about you used a genogram as a way to help this person reaccess the information she just told you. And then you talked about, in the clinical example you gave earlier, about putting the children behind the one-way mirror. I have done that. Maybe I learned that from you. But so here's the question. This person says you spoke about the one-way mirror you had the children sit behind in the session with the family case, and how you had not done that technique since. It sounds as though this helped bring about the opening of the secret and therefore progress with this family. If that is correct, I am curious as to why you have not used this technique.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. In this particular family, I think, let me say why we did it there. And we did it there because by the time we set that up, we knew there was one or more secrets. We didn't know what it was, and we knew it from the fact that they wouldn't let me talk about anything else, from this amazing thing of them telling me we don't trust outsiders and we treat outsiders with politeness and distance. And I thought, wow, how am I ever gonna get anywhere if I'm being treated with politeness and distance? And so it was from that position that we thought, let's have the children basically almost run the interview. I mean, and that is what they ended up doing, because we asked them to call anytime they had a question or anytime they thought one of their parents was treating me with politeness and distance because I'm an outsider. And I said it to them just like that, and it made perfect sense to them. Yeah, politeness and distance because you're an outsider. And so it made sense in that case. It might not make sense in another case. I'm not saying, I have certainly sometimes put kids behind a one-way mirror, and not so much for secrets, but let them watch it and watch their parents talk and that kind of thing. Kids love that. But yeah, it is usable. But I guess I am someone in my work who, well, as I said in a paper I just published in September, eschews certainties. I'm not crazy about models that just repeat and repeat and repeat the same thing in a kind of one-size-fits-all therapy, because I don't think one-size-fits-all. We're all too complex for that. And I'm not saying that you should do eclectic soup therapy, where you just mix up everything. I do tell my students, when you're first starting out, pick one model and learn it really, really well, and then you will meet a family that it doesn't fit, and you're going to have to go think again, and that's a good thing. So I think one of the other things I always tell my students is the joy of this work is that you will never be bored. And you will never be bored because of the things people bring into us, and because you need to keep thinking. And you can't just, like you're slapping paint on the side of a house and keep using the same color.
So, three things actually. I'm going to show people how to access that article you were just talking about, which is a wonderful article. It's in Family Process, and as far as I know, it's unlocked, so you could all download it and not have to pay for it. I'll show you that before we're finished today. The second thing is We have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to just keep track of that time. But we have a few questions here from people asking about affairs. So, for example, one person says, and I want to say this because she wants you to know that she's here. See if I can find it. She says, "Hi, Evan. This is Ji Hee from Chicago." She says, "Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about infidelity." Now, there are 3 or 4 questions about that. And she says, "I agree it all depends on the cases, but can you share what your general thoughts are on whether the affair needs to be disclosed or not to work on the marital relationship?" That's a very huge question, I know.
Yeah, yeah, it
But
is.
it's being asked.
Boy, oh boy. Again, you know, I mean, my position with all of this, as you probably gathered, is it all depends. I had a case years ago where some guy had an affair and in a marriage of about 17 years, and his wife had breast cancer at the time, and he thought he ought to tell her. Well, I don't think so. Maybe if she survives, and you know, I don't know, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I would want to ask a lot of questions about what's your motivation in opening the secret? Are you wanting to open it to get it off your back and onto someone else's? I never think that's a good idea. Are you opening it in anger? I never think that's a good idea. Are you opening it because you really want to reestablish integrity in the relationship? That's different, okay? Today, more and more, I'm finding that it's less a secret and more a marital crisis. Someone finds out, and they find out by checking their mate's cell phone. And you begin to wonder how stupid can people be, but never mind. Or did they want the person to find out? But, you know, it causes an explosion, and then they're in our office. So I think, you know, Frank Pittman wrote a book a number of years ago in which he insisted that that couples needed to, they always had to open an affair. And it's not a position I would take. I think which couple, under what circumstances, at what point in their lives, and then we'll you know, we'll kind of see. At the same time, having said that, I mean, somebody says, "Oh no, I can't open it because my spouse can't, you know, deal with this or whatever," I would begin to ask them to question that, because sometimes that's very self-serving. So I know I'm not giving you a real clear answer here, and it is one of those areas that I think differs. I've more often seen people want to tell, but again, increasingly now, what I'm seeing is it exploding, and people thinking they can keep it a secret, and you know what? They really can't. So I hope that answers your question, and hi, I'll see you soon.
So, you also have a hi here. I want to say, hi, Carla Crespo writes, "Hi from Portugal. I love your work."
Oh, thank you.
You know, when you say it all depends, again, we only have like 13 minutes left, but someone asked the question, what are the principles? Would you talk a little about the principles you work with secrets? Like, can you be more specific than it all depends? Or
Yeah. Well, okay. So the specificity is located first and foremost in that multiple interacting systems. Where's the secret located? What's it impacting at various levels? And then I want to think about the risks and benefits to each person and to each relationship in the family. And that authentic telling is not a talk show. The healing is going to occur over time and not by the next commercial break. I'm sure all of you have had the experience where somebody comes in and you'll often see this with affairs where they will open it and then they're like, "What's your problem? Get over it. I told you. Why are we still talking about this?" So I think our position does need to be that, hey, when you introduce new information into a pre-existing ecology, which is what happens when a secret opens, that ecology is going to rock for a while. And that it's our job to be there, to walk alongside people, to insist on that position that it is gonna take a while. Now, one of the homework things I give people, I don't find that most homework is repeating, but this one, when somebody's trying to decide about opening a secret, you may want to think about, and that is to ask the person, or if it's a couple and they're trying to decide about telling a child something, the issue of risks and benefits to each person and to each relationship. And so I will ask that person or people to go home and think about that, and to really embed themselves in every relationship in the family, in their own mind, in their imagination. I want you to think about the risks and benefits to your mother, to your father, to your sister, to your brother, to your relationship with your mother, with your mother and father's relationship with each other, and so on. Now, here's what happens with that. Usually when someone comes in and they are considering maybe I should open a secret, they have thought about all the risks. They have absolutely thought about all the risks. They have not thought about the benefits. And time after time, I find people will come back after doing that homework, and it's pretty extensive. I tell them to write it down and so forth. That they are surprised to find out about the benefits and the sense of relief in the imagination of, if I told so and so, yes, we're going to have to work on the relationship, but it's going to be better. Now, the woman that I told you about who had been raped by she was a kid and it was a cousin, and we did that exercise because she had been sent to live away from her family because the family was very poor, and she was sent to an aunt, and it was in that setting that this happened. She never told anybody. She came back to New York. She never told anybody till the day when we talked about it in my office. And I asked her to do this, and she came back, and she said she wanted to talk to her mother, that she realized that in our talking it over and in doing this, looking at the risks and benefits, that what happened to her was life-changing, and she wanted her mom to know, not because she wanted to put guilt or blame on her mother. She was very clear about that. But because she felt this was life-changing, what had happened to her. Now, this is an African-American woman who had been, sexually abused in her own family. Her daughter had been raped by security guards in their building. She goes and talks to her mother. I said, "You want to bring your mother?" She laughed. She said, "My mother would never come to therapy." She went and talked to her mother. She came back to see me. She said, after we talked about this, a little while later, my mother told me a story of being 17 years old, a girl in the South, walking along a road and being raped by a white man and never speaking about it. And she looked at me and she said, "This is it. This is 3 generations of women in my family and maybe more who have been sexually abused and silenced. We will be silent no more." Okay, now I wanted to cheer. And, the important thing here is what she got about the intergenerational silencing of women and what she wanted to do about that. And she then began talking to other people in her family and, went from there.
It's powerful stuff, Evan. It's very powerful. I'm going to save the last minute to thank you, but before I do that, I want to show people how to access your article. So I'm going to do that at the moment. While I'm doing that, I want to, a couple of people have asked if you would be willing to share the slides, or if not the slides, perhaps at least the your PDF of the slides, so we can talk about if you're willing to do that, and also if you're willing to share your email so people can contact you if they have their questions.
I'm certainly willing to share my email. It's EVANF, like Frank, T like Tom, Evan F. ft@verizon.net. The slides, what I would have to do is take out some genograms that are in the slides, and then sure. This is going to be on YouTube, isn't it, Vicki, also?
Yes, it is going to be on YouTube, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll figure it out. I'll figure it out with Vicki, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. So let me show you. This is the Family Process homepage through Wiley, who's our publisher. You can get to this page if you go to whatever search engine you have, and when you type into search, if you type in Family Process and click on that, what will come up, and I'm just doing that so you can see, is you'll have the Family Process official site, and then just click on that, and it'll take you right back to where I just was. So this homepage shows you the December issue. If you want to read Dr. Imber-Black's article that we're just talking about, go to the September issue, September 2014. I'm clicking on that. And you will see her article, Eschewing Certainties, the Creation of Family Therapists in the 21st Century. This is very useful, very wonderful read. And Evan talked about it in terms of talking about different models and different approaches and how to think about that. There's another, if you look on the sidebar here, I'm going up and down the sidebar, and you go to Special Features. If you click on the Evolution of Family Process, I'm not going to click on it, I don't think, right now, but if you click on it, you will get to a presentation that Dr. Imber-Black gave at the Family Process 50th Anniversary celebration in Santa Fe a few years ago. And that's a wonderful history of family therapy and a family process, so I certainly recommend that you look at that. This Eschewing Certainties also has a video abstract, so if you clicked on the video abstract, that would take you to Dr. Imber-Black's abstract about the article.
I'm Evan Imber-Black.
And that is on the Family Process 1 YouTube page. So we have a YouTube channel that you can look at several other videos if you'd like to look at them. And you can, John Lawless recommended that you take a look at that. You just go to YouTube and search Family Process 1. There's Dr. Imber-Black's video abstract that I just showed you. There are several playlists. This particular webinar will be uploaded onto the hashtag FPI webinar playlist. So you'll be able to access it there sometime after this webinar is over. So at this point, what I would like to do is go back to see you